story I'm reading is by Sir Tom Moore, 100 Steps. Tomorrow will be a good day. On a bright April morning, a 99-year-old man stood outside his house and held onto his walking frame. His name was Captain Tom Moore, and he had pledged to walk 100 lengths of his garden in time for his 100th birthday to raise money for the doctors and nurses risking their lives to save others. Tom took a deep breath. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he told himself one of the many important things he'd learned during his long life. The first step is always the hardest, but unless you take that first step, you will never finish. Tom grew up in a small town called Keighley in Yorkshire. His dad built houses and his mum was a teacher. Even though most boys avoided the kitchen in those days, Tom loved spending hours cooking with his mom. Enormous cakes with coloured icing, thick crusted pies, and fancy three-course meals. She taught him that it didn't matter who you were, you can do anything you want. But when he wasn't in the kitchen, Tom was outside playing with his dog Billy. They went everywhere together, on adventures in the garden and exploring the town. But best of all, they loved all running wild and free on the Yorkshire moors. Billy was named after Tom's favourite uncle, who raced motorbikes and taught Tom how to ride. At night, Tom would lie in bed, remembering the roar of the engine and the feeling of freedom he felt as the wheels spun beneath him. One day he said to himself, "I'll have a motorbike of my very own." Tom was hard at work at school. In essence, he was quiet and well behaved. He got on with his teachers and classmates. But he wasn't above bending the rules. When he was 12, Tom bought his first motorbike and rode it everywhere. He even would hide it in the school grounds so he would look at it at lunchtime. Ooh. And Tom's motorbike wasn't the only thing he'd sneak into school. As Tom grew older, he spent more and more time riding his motorbike. He and Billy would spend whole days racing across the moors, grinning ear to ear as the wind whipped through their hair and the sun bounced brightly off the motorbike. Every day can be an adventure.
How I came to life. I like when Mum tells this story because it makes me laugh so much. It's not funny in the way that a joke is funny, but when Mum tells it, Via and I just start cracking up. So when I was in my mum's stomach, no one had any idea I would come out looking the way I look. Mum had had Via 4 years before, and that had been such a walk in the park, Mum's expression, that there was no reason to run any special tests. About 2 months before I was born, the doctors realised there was something wrong with my face, but they didn't think it was going to be bad. They told Mum and Dad I had a cleft palate and some other stuff going on. They called it small abnormalities. There were 2 nurses in the delivery room the night I was born. One was very nice and sweet. The other one, Mum said, did not seem at all nice or sweet. She had very big arms, and, here comes the funny part, she kept farting. Like, she'd bring Mum some ice chips and then fart. She'd check Mum's blood pressure and fart. Mum says it was unbelievable because the nurse never even said, "Excuse me." Meanwhile, Mum's regular doctor wasn't on duty that night, so Mum got stuck with this cranky kid doctor she and Dad nicknamed Doogie, after some old TV show or something. They didn't actually call him that to his face. But Mum says that even though everyone in the room was kind of grumpy, Dad kept making her laugh all night long. When I came out of Mum's stomach, she said the whole room got very quiet. Mum didn't even get a chance to look at me because the nice nurse immediately rushed me out of the room. Dad was in such a hurry to follow her that he dropped the video camera, which broke into 1,000,000 pieces. And then Mum got very upset and tried to get out of bed to see where they were going, but the farting nurse put her very big arms on Mum to keep her down in the bed. They were practically fighting because Mum was hysterical and the farting nurse was yelling at her to stay calm. and when they both started screaming for the doctor. But guess what? He had fainted, right on the floor. So when the farting nurse saw that he had fainted, she started pushing him with her foot to get him to wake up, yelling at him the whole time, "What kind of doctor are you? What kind of doctor are you? Get up, get up!" And then all of a sudden, she let out the biggest, loudest, smelliest fart in the history of farts. Mum thinks it was actually the fart that finally woke the doctor up. Anyway, when Mum tells this story, she acts out all the parts, including the farting noises, and it's so funny. Mum says the farting nurse turned out to be a very nice woman. She stayed with Mum the whole time, didn't leave her side, even after Dad came back and the doctors told him how sick I was. Mum remembers exactly what the nurse whispered in her ear when the doctor told her I probably wouldn't live through the night. "Everyone born of God overcometh the world." And the next day, after I had lived through the night, it was that nurse who held Mum's hand when they brought her to meet me for the first time. Mum says by then she had told her all about me. She had been preparing herself for the seeing of me, but she says that when she looked down into my tiny mushed-up face for the first time, all she could see was how pretty my eyes were. Mum is beautiful, by the way, and Dad is handsome, and Vera is pretty, in case you were wondering.
Stormbreaker by Anthony Horowitz. This chapter is called Toys Aren't Us. Mrs. Jones was waiting for him when he walked into the hangar. She was sitting at a table wearing a grey silk jacket and trousers with a black handkerchief flowing out of the top pocket. For a moment she didn't recognise him. Alex was dressed in a flying suit. His hair was damp from the rain. His face was pinched with tiredness, and he seemed to have grown older very fast. None of the men had arrived back yet. A truck had been sent to collect them from the field about 3 kilometres away. "Alex," she said. Alex looked at her but said nothing. "It was my decision to stop you jumping," she said. "I hope you're not disappointed. I just thought it was too much of a risk. Please, sit down." Alex sat down opposite her. "I have something that might cheer you up," she went on. "I've bought you some toys." "I'm too old for toys," Alex said. "Not these toys." She signalled and a man appeared, walking in through the shadows, carrying a tray of equipment which he sat down on the table. The man was enormously fat. When he sat down, the metal chair disappeared beneath the spread of his buttocks, and Alex was surprised it could even take his weight. He was bald, with a black moustache and several chins, each one melting into the next, and finally into his neck and shoulders. He wore a pinstriped suit, which he must have used enough material to make a tent. "Smithers," he said, nodding at Alex. "Very nice to meet you, old chap." "What have you got for him?" Miss Jones demanded. "I'm afraid we haven't had a great deal of time, Mrs. J," Smithers replied. "The challenge was to think about what a 14-year-old might carry with him, and adapt it." He picked the first object off the tray, a yo-yo. It was slightly larger than normal, made of black plastic. "Let's start with this," Smithers said. Alex shook his head. He couldn't believe any of this. "Don't tell me," he exclaimed. "It's some sort of secret weapon." "Not exactly. I was told you weren't to have weapons. You're too young." "So it's not really a hand grenade? Pull the string and run like hell?" "Certainly not. It's a yo-yo." Smithers pulled out the string, holding it between a podgy finger and thumb. "However, the string is a special sort of nylon, very advanced."